Convergent gateways. All right, so what are the convergent gateways going to do? They're going to grab all the threads, all of their inlets, and they're going to let the flow go through its unique outlet. They work in different ways. We've got here an exclusive convergent gateway. This one, it's going to allow the flow to continue when the first thread arrives, and then all the other inlets are going to be invalidated. What this means is if later on a thread arrives from any other inlet, it doesn't matter. It's not going to work. It's not going to allow flow to continue out of this gateway because it already did. All right. Then there's the CO gateway. This one controls which of the inlets have flow on them, depending on what happened earlier in the process, and it waits until all the threads have flow. And once they've arrived, it allows the unique thread, the unique outlet, to contain the flow, okay, to continue. So in this case, the CO gateway, I like to remember this gateway as the intelligent gateway because, as it says here, it's going to wait for one or more threads to arrive, depending on what happened early in the process. So it's actually a smart gateway. It knows what's happening in the process, and it's going to wait for all the inlets it has to wait for. So it's going to know, okay, I only have to wait for one. So when that thread arrives, it's going to allow the flow to continue. But if it knows that all three threads should arrive, well, then it's going to wait for all three of them. So the first one arrives, it doesn't continue. The second one arrives, it doesn't continue. The third one arrives, and then it does continue. It does allow the flow to continue. So this one, I remember it as the smart gateway. And then there's the CA gateway. This one's easy because it always waits for all of the flows to arrive in order to allow the flow to continue through its outlet. Okay, so this one, it's always waiting for all of them. So the first thread arrives, it still waits. The second thread arrives, it waits. The third and last thread arrives, and then it allows the flow to continue. And then there's the CL. It's similar, but in this case, each time the flow arrives, it lets the flow go out. This is basically, it works like a funnel. Anything that arrives goes out. Okay, so the first thread arrives, it lets it out. The second thread arrives, it lets it out. The third thread arrives, it lets it out, and so on. Okay, now we're going to see some examples of each one of these. So first of all, we have a CX gateway. When does the flow arrive? This is the important thing for this gateway, because as soon as the first thread arrives, it's going to allow it to go out through its unique outlet. And even though later on there's more threads arriving, this gateway doesn't really care. It says, okay, I already managed the first thread. Whatever arrives through these other threads is going to be invalidated. So let's say at 12:03, flow arrived. It allowed it to continue. And afterwards at 20 past 12, the flow arrived again. The gateway doesn't allow it to continue because it already did previously. And then later on at 20 past 3, the flow arrived. Still, it doesn't allow the flow to continue. Why? Because it already did. Now we're going to see an example of how an inclusive convergent gateway works. Here, this gateway knows how many threads are going to arrive with flow. So even though the first one arrives, it says, okay, I know the thread arrived, but I still know I have to wait for this other one. So until this one doesn't arrive, I'm not going to allow the flow to continue. Once it does, then the flow can go out. And it's not going to wait for this one because it's a smart gateway. It actually knows that it doesn't have to wait for this one. All right. Now here we have a CA gateway. This one's really easy to remember. Everything always has to arrive in order for the flow to continue. And the collector, as I mentioned before, it's a funnel. The first thread arrives, it lets it out. Second thread arrives, it lets it out. Third thread arrives, it lets it out. Okay, so it's always letting the flow out. It's as dropping water into a funnel. As soon as you drop water in, it goes out.